Fast go. Hey everyone, it's Jack from WhatCulture.com. Now let's start things off with all of this week's WWE news. First of all, sound the new champion klaxon. We've still not got one of those. We really need a new champion klaxon for when there's a new champion. What do you mean it's in the post? Now just last night, something huge happened in NXT. Finn Balor lost the NXT Championship to Samoa Joe on a house show. The show was in Lowell, Massachusetts, and there's been a little bit of confusion online because some people have reported that Finn rolled his ankle a few moments before being pinned, but then some people have reported that maybe it's a work. There was footage that was tweeted to me last night because I'm a big-time journalist, bad boy rapper MC, there was some footage that was tweeted to me last night of Finn getting onto the tour bus after the show, stopping, turning to the crowd and then saying, "I'll see you on Monday." Everyone lost their minds, but then again, Balor is known as one of the biggest teasers in the business, if that doesn't sound too filthy. Now, this happened earlier this week on Monday Night Raw, but it is still big enough news to make it onto the fast count. Anderson and Gallows attacked Roman Reigns in the middle of the ring. This might immediately seem as though WWE have jumped the gun. They've straight away made a trio out of AJ, Anderson and Gallows, but it's not quite that simple because if you watched Raw, you'll have seen that AJ was actually very conflicted. He didn't follow Anderson and Gallows to the back, and he's since denied to Roman Reigns that he instructed them to do so. This is really interesting if you relate it back to my previous point about Finn Balor, because as we all know, when an NXT champion loses their belt, it can't be too long before they call it to the main roster, and Balor also has history with Bullet Club, so it opens up a variety of possibilities that weren't there just a few days ago. And finally, we do have some sad news to report on the fast count. I'm sure you know this if you're a wrestling fan already, but Joan Laura, better known as WWE's Chyna, sadly passed away this week. We've actually covered this quite extensively, and if you want to hear more about our thoughts on Chyna and all the respect we have for her as a pioneer in women's wrestling, you can check out the latest WhatCulture podcast, which is a Chyna special entitled Thank You Chyna, where Adam and Kenny discuss her career and her legacy and the possibility of her going into the Hall of Fame sometime in the future. And now for all the news from elsewhere in the world of wrestling. This week's edition of TNA Impact saw a pretty big main event as Matt Hardy took on his brother Jeff in an I Quit match. Now, maybe just a little bit of advice for TNA here. I don't want to come across as too patronising. I'm not a booker by any means. I'm not Adam Blomp here or anything. But if you're going to do an I Quit match, you should probably end the match with one of the wrestlers actually saying I quit. That's just a thought. Ending an I Quit match by knockout or referee stoppage, or in this case, a stretcher job, it happens quite a lot in wrestling, but it's something that's far too commonplace, and WWE are guilty of this, indie promotions are guilty of this as well, and TNA are guilty of this week. It's a sort of cheap get out, isn't it? It doesn't really give the fans what they came to see. Another interesting follow-up to this story is the fact that Matt has now been tweeting that he's injured now. A part of the table he went through did something to his spine, and he's never going to wrestle again, but this is really probably a work because you've got to remember that TNA was pre-taped and Matt has, I think, since wrestled at WrestleCon. New Japan Pro Wrestling have already offered Will Ospreay a regular contract, and this doesn't sound like too big a news story on the surface until you remember that Will Ospreay is very young, younger than me, no I'm not 5, I'm 23, and very new to Japanese wrestling. Now Will Ospreay is obviously one of the hottest indie talents in the wrestling world right now. If you've not heard of him, check out his recent match with Kushida at New Japan Invasion Attack. That was incredible and is probably the match that led to him being offered this contract. Now the biggest question is, where does Ospreay go from here? Because there is apparently also interest from WWE, which is always going to be very tempting. And finally, the next #1 contender for Jay Lethal's Ring of Honor Championship has been confirmed. This May, Ring of Honor are putting on one of their semi-regular joint shows with New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Jay Lethal will be putting his title on the line against Colt Cabana in Chicago. Very interesting. Now, if you sort of know a little bit about Colt, you'll know that he's a fantastic comedy wrestler and he's a very charismatic guy, but I think this angle will bring out his more serious side. This is his return to ROH. It's his shot, potentially probably his last shot at the title, let's say, and I think even though he might not win, we'll definitely see a really good storyline. And now for all of this week's biggest takeaways. First and foremost, it's the elephant in the room. Will Chyna get into the Hall of Fame next year? Now, the Ninth Wonder of the World has had a strained relationship with WWE in the past few years, but since her sad passing, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon have both tweeted their condolences, and WWE seem a lot more ready to engage with the fans about Chyna's past and really bring her legacy to the fore. In a recent interview regarding Chyna's potential place in the Hall of Fame, Triple H actually stated, "What she did in her life certainly warrants it." So I think we can hopefully take it as a given that we will see Chyna in the Hall of Fame come 2017. Is Finn Balor going to move up to the main roster, and if so, when? So as I mentioned earlier in the video, there was footage of Balor shouting "see you on Monday" to a group of fans right after losing his NXT championship. If this turns out to be true, I think it's a bad move, because I think WWE might have laid all their cards on the table far too early. If Balor is to make the jump, I think the best time to do it is on May the 1st at Payback. First of all, any angle like this, any debut, any return, anything like that happens on a pay-per-view immediately makes a lot more impact, just because of the bigger scale that it's on and the wider audience that it reaches. If he does debut at Payback, you might immediately think, oh, AJ Styles is winning the title because his Bullet Club mates have come along. AJ Styles isn't going to win the title. I'm really sorry again, I said it last week. AJ Styles isn't going to beat Roman Reigns. It's going to look really bad now if he beats him, isn't it? And thirdly, TNA is in really, really big trouble. Like, they're in such big trouble. Like, it's unbelievable. Dixie Carter, you must be quite stressed right now, and I don't blame you, because you might have heard that TNA have been forced to downsize to a merchandise warehouse. There's been reports of that. There's also been reports of dealings with Ron and Don Harris, a pair of very controversial figures in the wrestling industry. Whether they'll be gaining more influence or not, that'll be probably a bad sign for the promotion. But what does this mean for the wrestling world as a whole? As much as TNA are looked upon as a joke sometimes, they have brought the wrestling world many great moments over the past decade or so. And despite that, I can't help but think that if they were to close down, it would just open the door for so many more potentially great promotions to gain in prominence, like Ring of Honor, New Japan, Evolve, promotions like that. So that's all we've got time for this week on The Fast Count. I've been Jack from WhatCulture.com. You can find me at Jack_the_Jobber on Twitter. Please, I need to stay ahead of Ross, and I'll see you soon. So that's all we've got for this week. See you soon, Jack_the_Jobber at Twitter.